Good afternoon and welcome to our program today. My name is Marco Avila. I'm the chairman of the board and president of the Maryland Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. We have a very exciting afternoon today. We have a round table. We have Tom Barkin, who's going to be our main keynote speaker, and going to tell us everything that the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond is doing. We're very excited about that. We're also going to have, for the first time, we are joining forces with all the Hispanic chambers in the DMV. We're going to have the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Montgomery County. We're going to have the Virginia Hispanic Chamber, the Greater Washington Hispanic Chamber, the Northern Virginia Hispanic Chamber, and of course, the Maryland Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. This is very exciting. Something that I don't think in my tenure we haven't done. So I'm excited to look, I'm looking forward to keep doing this and help each other. If you're not a member of any of the chambers, please reach out to any of us and join. We are, one of our biggest goals is to become, the biggest chambers in the region. So please get involved and look and see what we do. We are very excited to have different programs and mentoring programs and education and networking. So with that, let's move quickly. We have a big agenda. So I'd like to introduce Andy Bauer, who's going to tell us a little bit about the Reserve Bank and everything that they do. Andy, take it away.
Sure. So good afternoon. My name is Andy Bauer. I'm the regional executive for the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond out of the Baltimore branch. So I'd like to give you a very brief background about our organization and to explain why we're part of this program. So I've found that for those that aren't familiar with us, our name can be somewhat confusing. They see federal in the name and think we're part of the federal government, or they see bank and believe we're a commercial bank. However, neither is the case. The Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond is one of the 12 regional reserve banks that, along with the Board of Governors in Washington, D.C., comprise the Federal Reserve System, more commonly known simply as the Fed. The Federal Reserve is interesting for a variety of reasons. I'm slightly biased, but I think for a variety of reasons. But one, in my opinion, is that it has a somewhat unique governance structure, and that is part public and part private. The public part is the Board of Governors. There are 7 governors with one who serves as the chair of the Fed system. Currently, Jay Powell is the chair of the Federal Reserve. I like to joke, if you're ever nominated by the president, confirmed by Congress to a position, you work for the government. That's not the case with us. The Richmond Fed and the other 11 reserve banks are private. Now, that doesn't mean that we're the same as a private commercial bank, however. As part of the Federal Reserve System, the regional reserve banks share the same mission as the overall reserve system. So, and what is that mission? So the Fed is most commonly known for its conduct of monetary policy. The Fed's monetary policy mandate is to promote maximum employment and stable inflation near 2%. 8 times a year, the 12 regional reserve presidents and the 7 governors meet to determine the course of monetary policy for the nation. It is at these meetings, and you may have heard the term FOMC meeting. FOMC stands for Federal Open Market Committee. That's this group of 12 bank presidents and the 7 governors. So at these meetings that they decide policy, which typically involves setting the level of short-term interest rates. By changing interest rates, the FOMC is able to influence the availability of money and credit in the broader economy, as business people very well. Now, in times of severe economic distress, such as last year when the pandemic hit, or during the financial crisis in 2008, the FOMC has taken a much more expansive role, using a number of policy tools to help stabilize the economy and inflation. Now, I do need to state that in addition to monetary policy, which we're most known for, the Fed does a number of other things, including supervising the banking system, provides financial services to commercial banks and to the Treasury, has a large role in the payment system, and has a community development function, which many are surprised to hear. So that's the quick background about our organization. Now, so why are we here? Why do we want to learn about businesses and communities in Maryland, the greater DC area, and in Virginia? Well, in order to get monetary policy right, and it is important for us to understand what's going on in the economy and how businesses, consumers, and communities are faring. Now, this is particularly true when we have traumatic economic upheaval, such as last year. Now, we look at data and their economic models that we use, but there really isn't any substitute to getting the perspective firsthand from those in affected industries and affected labor markets. Our district, the 5th district, includes Maryland, DC, Virginia, most of West Virginia, and North and South Carolina. Throughout our district, we're regularly talking with businesses and community leaders to understand how they see economic conditions, what's going on with their businesses, and it's their perspectives that help inform our view of the broader U.S. economy. Now, the Hispanic community was hit especially hard during the pandemic. This is true in terms of the course of the pandemic and how it impacted people, as well as it impacted businesses. A survey conducted by American University in partnership with the Greater Washington Hispanic Chamber of Commerce found that almost three-quarters of Hispanic businesses suffered substantial loss of customers and revenue, as well as dramatic negative impact on their operations. And due to the nature of the business, only a small number were able to move online or to shift to telework. I was talking earlier with my community development colleague, and he said, with respect to the economy and changing economic conditions, the Hispanic community is often like the canary in the coal mine. If you want to know what's going to happen first, you need to keep tabs on that community. And so I think this was particularly true last year. So thankfully, the outlook has improved dramatically since then, and we're really looking forward to hearing from the businesses participating today and getting their perspectives. So thank you. And Marco, back to you.
Hey, thanks, Andy. And before we move on to our main speaker of the afternoon, I'd like to have all the leaders from the Hispanic chambers in the area to introduce themselves. And we can start with Susana. Go ahead.
Thank you, Marcos. I'm Susana Marino. I'm a Latina. I'm an immigrant from Venezuela, an entrepreneur and the founding president of Northern Virginia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. But most importantly, in 2020, last year, I was appointed by the Virginia Governor, Ralph Northam, to serve at the board of the Virginia Small Business Financing Authority. In that capacity, we are responsible for funding all the economic developments across Virginia, as well as funding the SWAM program, and definitely much more. To accomplish this goal, the Virginia Small Business Financing Authority offers loans directly to businesses and nonprofits, credit enhancements to banks that are lending to business and nonprofits, as well as bonds. I definitely want to thank President and CEO Tom Barkin and the entire team at the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond for the incredible opportunity that you made possible this afternoon. Like Marco said, I've been here for close to 9 years, and I have never had the opportunity to have a roundtable like this. So I'm definitely very excited about this afternoon. And like my colleagues at all the chambers, we have heard the many challenges and uncertainty and fear our community is facing right now. However, I feel optimistic. The recovery is soon in the horizon, given that in 2019, one of the driving growth in the United States economy is our young and educated Latino labor force. And in addition, per a recent published 2020 US Latino GDP report, the size of the US Latino market measured by GDP was $2.6 trillion in 2018. Certainly, these numbers have not disappeared. And like I always said, money didn't evaporate. It moved, and it certainly moved to innovative sectors. Today, we're going to discuss important topics affecting the Latino community and in our region, of course, and such as education, healthcare, affordable housing, workforce development, and more. But there is one important economic indicator that I didn't want to be omitted, and that was that the US Latino market opportunity, referred as the new Main Street economy, is very important for the entire country recovery, okay? The market, the US Latino market within the United States is growing at 8.6%. That's faster than China, faster than India, and really nobody talks about that. And despite the size and the growth of the segment of the economy, continues to be like a blind spot for American decision makers. Every year, corporate America leaves $300 million on the table just because they don't know this, Latinos as the buying power that we have in our economy. I feel optimistic. Our region is more awake and alive, more committed to inclusion, sustainability, and equity, for sure. Government, social, and private sector actors are learning in together, and we together, and my colleagues at the chambers, are definitely addressing the entrenched and complex local issues that we have. I want to thank, the bench certainly to put this event together, and we will continue to be the hands-on solutions center that I represent. Thank you very much, Marco.
Thank you, Susana. Carmen Larson, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Montgomery County, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Carmen Ortiz Larson. I'm the chair of the board and president of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for Montgomery County. And at our chamber, we serve Montgomery County, which is right next to the district. So we have a lot of interest in what's going on in the DC and the DMV area. And we also serve our adjoining counties that have lots of synergies with Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Howard County, Frederick County in particular. So one of the things I wanted to do is thank you very much for the Federal Reserve Board representatives here to reach out to the Latino community. I have been a small business owner for the last 30 years. I'm also, besides my chamber hat, I have been the founder and CEO of Aquas Incorporated, which is a technology and engineering firm working a lot with healthcare IT and the public transit sector in their efforts to make safety part of their culture. I wanted to thank you particularly because our constituency is very broad and very unique. The Latino community is such a big participant in the economy, and it has, as was previously said by my colleague Susana, that it's often unrecognized. We see the Latino community in the construction business. We see the Latino community in the restaurant business, and we know that they were very prevalent there and in the janitorial business. But we're also in the STEM, and we have programs, and our Latino youth have to be inspired to work in all walks of industries. So, and we are represented in all those. We have been very hard hit during the pandemic, but we're a very resilient people. And I think with the right programs, we will be able to come back. One of the things that I have tried to do is participate with our chamber in different sectors of the economy. I represent our minority businesses on the board of the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. I'm a board member there. Also, I represent the Minority Business Development Agency and the Affordable Housing Conference of Montgomery County, of whom I am proudly a board member as well. The chamber has a sister organization, which is a foundation. I wanted to bring this up because Andrew brought up the Federal Reserve Board having community outreach interest. In our foundation, we have our foundation available to all the chambers in this area. It is a 501c3. One of the programs that we have, besides the entrepreneurial support program and growth of social capital for the Latinos young businesses, is our program for the STEM and youth programs, which is a mentored internship program for both STEM and the lively arts. I call them the art programs for the Latino youth that are in high schools and are we try to get them enthusiastic to complete their high school to close the gap in high school graduation. But anyhow, I want my other colleagues to have a chance, and thank you very much for listening. And the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is proud to be here. Thank you very much, Marco.
Thank you, Carmen. Let's move on to Nicole from the Greater Washington Hispanic Chamber.
Marco, thank you so much. And again, as everyone is saying, thank you to the Federal Reserve and everybody that's put this together. Again, to the point, and you'll hear it repeated, I'm sure, this is the first time since I've been around with the chamber, and even when I was leading Telemundo, that I've seen Hispanic chambers come together. More often than not, if you throw back to the past, you hear more conflict than camaraderie. And I really want to say thank you for everybody who has come to the table, not worried about competition against one another, but rather building something stronger and larger so that we can actually provide the impact that I know we will provide. The Greater Washington Hispanic Chamber of Commerce works with DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So even while sometimes we see some overlap, there really is no overlap. We have business for everyone, and certainly small businesses need all of our help. As was made reference earlier, we have different programs within each Chamber of Commerce. So I would invite everyone to take a moment and look at the different chambers of commerce to see what different programs are offered. Our mission right now at the moment is to provide as much technical assistance as many businesses as possible. We have just a numerous amount of boot camps and seminars, series that have really helped our businesses try and get back on their feet, helping them rebuild their finances, connecting them with access to capital, and teaching them how to get certified in order for them to have equal opportunity across the board with different jurisdictions for different contracts. So if anyone needs help with that, please reach out to us. Again, I'm looking forward to hearing industry experts. You know, we don't know what we don't know. And so people that are in the thick of it, seeing how their industries are being affected every day, specifically the Latino community within those industries, I'm truly looking forward to learning where the gaps are. And as our chambers move forward, Marco made reference to it, you know, who knows, we build a chamber of the future where we're all working together as a powerhouse, adjusting our respective missions a little bit, you know, increasing our impact. Now more than ever, we need to maximize our resources, our human capital, and personally our passion in order to get the work that we need to get done. But I know that we can do it, and this is a wonderful step. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you to everyone, to all of my colleagues.
Thank you, Nicole. With that, let's move on to the Virginia Hispanic Chamber. Michelle.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you, and it is really about the synergy we all bring together and the help we do in the community. I've been real fortunate to be able to work with the Federal Reserve, and for many years I was on your community advisory board, and I even got to go down into your vaults underneath to see the work that you do and see all the money that's there too. And that's what it's a lot of money and a lot of opportunity that the Hispanic community brings. I think the Hispanic community is larger than all the population of Canada, larger than all the population in Central America, and over 55 million Latinos living in the United States, so spending over $1 trillion a year. The Hispanic Chamber of Commerce was started 20 years ago, and we have grown in the last year, just like many other organizations and businesses. You know, we had to pivot. And I think in this time, we've really worked even more closely with our members, helping them to get PPP loans, helping them to be up on the technology to help them grow their business in a new and different way. And we're really pleased on the outcomes that we have had for a lot of these businesses. But I think it's coming together as a group like this so we can all learn and help each other to grow. We also have a sister organization, the Virginia Hispanic Foundation, where the chamber, we focus on B2B business and bringing opportunities to our members and partners. And I see several of our partners here and Goodwill. I see Russ Rayner and is one of our partners. But through our foundation, we help in different areas. One is education. Program called Passport to Educación. We have a bilingual business incubator development center. We have something called Trabaja VA to really help connect employers with employees. And then we have legal and technical clinics that we offer some of the programs, but it's really to provide information, education, and resources to the Hispanic community. We've given out over $180,000 in scholarships, and I know we'll talk more about education a little bit, but I do think, this region has one of the fastest growing Hispanic business growth in the mid-Atlantic, the greater Washington area, Maryland, Virginia. We encompass one of the most influential Latino communities, not only in the country, but in the world. But it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the Federal Reserve, Tom, and your team.
Thanks, Michelle. And from the Maryland Hispanic Chamber, I just cannot add anything different. Everybody, you guys said everything that we had to say, and like we said before, we've been trying to do the same thing, so why not join forces, right? La unión hace la fuerza. United would be, more powerful and be able to do things together. So thanks, Tom, and your team for, joining us. We've been partners with you guys for many years, and we look forward to continue doing this on the bigger scale. Well, without further ado, I gave the floor to Tom Barkin, CEO and President of the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. Tom, please take it away.
Thanks, Marco. Appreciate you inviting me to be with you today, and in particular to the Maryland Hispanic Chamber for hosting this. It's great to see so many of you again. Michelle, thanks again for the time you spent with me in Manassas just recently. And the many others on the call who've been unbelievably helpful as we try to get into our communities. I understand this is the first time that these 5 chambers have gotten together, and I do hope it'll be a tradition for the future, because we've got a lot to learn from one another, and I'm looking forward to the conversations later today. I won't spend a lot of time, but I thought I might spend a little bit of time on how COVID has affected the Hispanic workforce. Specifically, I know that's a priority for everybody here, and we focus on that topic at the Fed because workforce growth is key to economic growth. And as several of you just said, the Hispanic community is central to growing our workforce. And so hopefully this will give some high level context to the roundtable, because the issues that you're going to discuss, like education and healthcare and access to capital, contribute to how the Hispanic workforce fared during COVID and are going to be critical tools in recovery and beyond. Before I dive in, I just want you to affirm these are my views and my views only. They're not necessarily those of other colleagues at the Federal Reserve System or in the Federal Open Market Committee. So let me start by using a definition. I want to look at the Hispanic workforce through the lens of a ratio that we call the employment to population ratio. That measures what percentage of the population is currently employed. And that includes people who are out of work and looking for a job, and people who are out of work and not looking for a job. So it's really the broadest measure of workforce deployment. And I focus on that ratio because, connecting workers to employment is what actually signals a real recovery. Now, interestingly, and I didn't realize this until I got into it, the Hispanic employment to population ratio has actually been higher over the last 2 decades than that of the non-Hispanic population. That might surprise you too, especially because Hispanic unemployment, that's the percentage of people looking for work, has actually been higher than non-Hispanic unemployment. The size of the gap has varied over time. It's smaller during recessions and wider in expansions, but it's consistent. And it's driven primarily by Hispanic men. Since 2000, the employment to population ratio for Hispanic men has consistently been 4 to 9 points higher than that for non-Hispanic men. And that's largely because of the age distribution of the populations. Hispanic men skew toward age groups more active in the labor force, but Hispanic men somewhat outperform even in the prime age category. In contrast, Hispanic women have historically trailed their non-Hispanic counterparts. Now, before the pandemic, Hispanic women had finally made up some ground, but by February 2020, a lengthy economic expansion, increased educational attainment, and a decline in fertility rates had allowed Hispanic women to finally catch up. The two groups were about even. And all that combined to mean that right before the pandemic, the gap between the Hispanic and non-Hispanic employment to population ratios was at its widest point on record. Further, the historically strong labor market with strong hiring and high wage growth in lower wage positions had even helped the Hispanic unemployment rate reach its lowest point ever, which was 4% in September of 2019. So that's the background. But then, of course, the pandemic hit. And no question, it hit Hispanic workers harder than non-Hispanic ones. Between February and April of last year, 1 in 5 Hispanic employees lost their jobs. That's a much sharper decline than the one experienced by non-Hispanic employees, which was more like 1 in 7. And the record-wide gap between Hispanic and non-Hispanic employment levels that I just talked about, it shrunk to 0 in just 2 months. Now, a huge part of the story is Hispanic workers' concentration in services. Now, take accommodation and food services. This industry lost nearly half of its jobs between February and April last year. Hispanic workers, who are about 17% of the overall workforce, compose 27% of this subsector. If you broaden your scope and look at all service occupations, regardless of industry, 1 in 4 Hispanic workers work in service occupations, and Hispanic women, 1 in 3 work in service occupations. Now, across all workers, it's fewer than 1 in 5. And service occupations saw outsized employment loss because they operate largely in person. One estimate from the Hispanic Policy Institute suggests that only 1 in 6 Hispanic employees were able to telework in response to the pandemic. And that lack of remote work exacerbated issues beyond employment for Hispanic workers, especially women. Inability to telework may have forced many primary caregivers, often women, to either quit or find childcare or elder care at a time when supply constraints made it scarce. Concentration in in-person positions also meant heightened exposure to COVID. The risk affected not only Hispanic workers, but their families, and Hispanic adults are more likely to live in multi-generational households. As a result, COVID was disproportionately felt by Hispanic communities. CDC data suggests that the COVID case rate for Hispanics is 2 times the rate for non-Hispanics. The hospitalization rate is 2.8 times higher, and the death rate 2.3 times higher. As of June 14th, Hispanics were 29% of cases, but just under 19% of the population. Now, despite these losses, we now have a recovery well underway. Vaccines are widely and increasingly available. COVID cases are dropping. And as they drop, we're watching the economy pick up strongly. The demand for labor looks healthy, and we're seeing historically high job postings. The latest jobs report shows Hispanic workers have recovered quickly. They're basically at the same drop from February 2020 levels as non-Hispanic workers. And considering how steep the drop was, that's notable. Looking at employment to population, a positive gap has come back, with Hispanic workers now 3 percentage points higher than non-Hispanics. However, it's important to note that the labor market has reverted back into one where Hispanic men are driving the difference, while Hispanic women still lag behind non-Hispanic women. So Hispanic men are down 1%, non-Hispanic men are down 3.3%. So the Hispanic men are actually pretty close to a full recovery. In contrast, Hispanic women's employment remains nearly twice as far from February 2020 levels as non-Hispanic women, so down a little over 5% versus 2.5%. Again, industry plays a huge role here. Service industries like leisure and hospitality are now adding jobs, but there's still a big deficit from where they were. You know, as the service sector recovers and schools and childcare facilities reopen, Hispanic women may once again catch up to non-Hispanic women, but we may not see that. Service industries may not seem as attractive anymore. And that means there may need to be an investment in retraining to get back to where we were. So a few levers, just as I'm closing, that might contribute to a fuller recovery. The first, of course, is vaccinations. The vaccine rollout has fueled the strength of this recovery, but there's still room for growth among the Hispanic community. The latest data from 40 states showed that 38% of Hispanics had received at least one vaccine dose, compared to 46% of whites. And if we can get beyond access barriers and information gaps, we can make progress and bolster our recovery. The second would be delivering fiscal aid. The stimulus that's been passed over the last year has been historic. But like vaccines, it's only effective when it reaches individuals. Rental relief programs are now starting to get going. Child tax credit payments begin in July. And we know Hispanic communities face unique obstacles to accessing aid, ranging from language barriers to immigration-induced hesitation. But if we can ensure available support is reaching individuals, we'll see an even stronger recovery. And then third, bolstering small businesses. The Paycheck Protection Program may no longer be accepting new applications, but the need to foster growth among small businesses remains. By one measure, the number of small businesses open today is still down by 44% since January 2020. And within this, we've seen Hispanic-owned businesses suffer losses. And just as we saw with employment, this has been most acute among Latina-owned businesses. After the Great Recession, small businesses in the US would have declined were it not for the growth in Hispanic-owned firms. Now, I'm hopeful that with our current momentum and efforts in these three areas, we'll see continued strength in the overall economy and with the Hispanic workforce. And again, I appreciate all that these groups that are together today do to help on these topics. But now I think it's time to learn. And so let me turn it over to our roundtable panelists, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing their perspectives.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for all the valuable information. Now we're going to move on to the roundtable. We're going to cover education with Lisa Sarug, Educational Director of Virginia Hispanic Foundation. We're going to have the healthcare with Francisco Ayala, Association Account Manager for Kaiser Permanente. We're going to have affordable housing, Roger Campos, Assistant Secretary for Project CORE from the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. We're going to cover also workforce development with Alberto Marino, Alexandria Arlington Regional Workforce Council Chair, Senior Diversity Officer, Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. And finally, we're going to have the Small Business Growth and Sustainability with Mauricio Marquez, PhD, Chief Technology Officer of Aquas, Inc. With that, in the interest of time, we are not going to read their bios, but we're going to post that so you guys can read it at your leisure. And we're going to have each speaker have a 3 to 5 minute presentation. And we're going to start with education. Lisa, please take it away.
All right, hola, buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
So looking at statistics, like will help determine how equal the American education system is and within the student population demographics. So from 2019 to 2020, 15.1 million students attended high school. And the high school student enrollment is significant because it can show how much the current youth population is actively engaged in secondary education. And then it also helps us see if the nation as a whole is achieving greater educational status. So the Hispanic population growth shaping the US demographic makeup in its future for sure. And the face of the country continues to change, becoming more diverse over like the coming decades. So by 2060, 31% of the population will be Hispanic, and some of our schools already have 90% Hispanic students enrolled. So it's an estimated that 3,650,000 students will have graduated from high school in 2020. So the national graduation rate is 85.3% and an all-time high. It's 89.7% of white students graduated on time, and then 79% of Black, and then 81% of Hispanic. Although Hispanic students' graduation rates have increased by 10%, it is still below national average. So, for example, Richmond Public Schools continues to generate more dropouts and produce fewer graduates in 4 years than virtually any other school division in Virginia, according to the latest yearly report from the State Department of Education. So despite like pandemic-induced halts to grading and of course testing in the final 3 months of like 2019 and 2020, Richmond Public Schools issued diplomas to about 1,078 students of the 1,500 who began with 9th grade in 2017, like according to that report. And then it's a 71.6% graduation rate, and it lags really far behind the state's 92.3% on-time graduation rate for all 132 public school divisions. And then 349 students, or nearly 1 in 4 from the class of 2020, dropped out before graduation, and has a student loss rate of 23.2%, nearly 5 times the state average. So a closer look at the report shows one of the unaddressed concerns involves the education of Latino students. Over 314 Latino students began high school 4 years ago, only 106, 1 in 3 completed 12th grade. So then 5 are still enrolled, but 203 dropped out during the 4 years. So while graduation rate for Latino students in Richmond has always been extremely low, this year's 33% just represents that drop from 2019. And then the African-American students across Virginia are achieving at higher rates. And so statewide, 91.3% of African-American students graduated in 4 years. So given the challenges of making virtual school, and early reports suggested that between 1,000 and 2,000 students are not participating. And then the prospects at this time for the 2021 report to show little progress in closing the gap between Richmond Public Schools graduation rates and the state graduation rate. So then in Maryland's Howard County schools, it's a different story. So the graduation rate for Black students increased to 91.2% in 2020, while Hispanic students graduated at an 80.4% rate. And so students in the system's limited English proficiency group saw a 10% increase in graduation rate. So Howard's overall graduation rate is about 6.5% higher than the state wide rate of 86.8. So, and then Prince George's County and Baltimore City had the state's 2 lowest graduation rates at 76.2 and then 69.9. So I think DC as another example, they saw increases across multiple student groups, like graduation rate for Hispanic and Latino students increased 3.8%, and the rate for African American students increased 2.5%. And so the rates for English learners, students with disabilities, and then students who are at risk increased 4.5, 2.5, and 2.2. So the statewide concern in 2020 pandemic related year is that a lot of Hispanic students may not have had access to the remote learning and did not have access to the credit recovery. So the students lacked laptops at the start of the pandemic and when the schools initially closed. And so in the spring, not every student had a laptop and not every student had access. So not having that technology or access to broadband, that digital divide is serious. Some students are going to fall farther and farther behind. It's going to be done by immigration, class, ethnicity, race, and other social and economic statuses, basically. And so it's estimated that 9 to 12 million students and some of their teachers were lacking home internet access and unable to participate in teaching and learning. So that was a challenge. Then the COVID slide has been identified nationwide as school divisions struggled to react to the pandemic and with the grades that fall. And so they're trying to make a slide scale. And so there has to be other solutions, programs that come in and help the school systems at this time, especially. So for example, new programs for English learners are popping up constantly. And I know with the Virginia Hispanic Foundation's Pasaporte a la Educación bilingual leadership programs for Hispanic students in elementary, middle, and high school does help offer a solution for the dropout rate and make a positive impact, on the educational future of Hispanic students to prepare an educated workforce. And I know Jesus Portillo is on the call. He was a leadership coach and mentor to many of the students for many years and made a huge difference and impact in their lives. And so the programs basically address hurdles Hispanic students face in a caring and culturally relevant way. And the programs are solving unique challenges for Hispanic students. And that is what is needed by addressing the language barriers and the struggles with cultural assimilation, and helping them acquire those English language skills at an accelerated rate, improve literacy in their native language, and then ultimately graduate with a diploma. And the programs also expose students to new learning experiences. And programs like this are needed in the schools now because the schools are functioning at somewhat of a deficient, and they're having to rethink and retool exactly how they're offering education in a combination of a hybrid approach of virtual and in-school based. And so what we want to do is just to continue to offer the opportunity for them to follow their dreams and embrace creative options, so that they will find, continue their higher education or skill set certification and continue to graduation. And this is our future workforce. And that's, a lot of students, a lot of times might enter into the workforce early. So the goal is to keep them on track for their high school graduation and then beyond. And the students see things differently, and they're natural entrepreneurs, the ones that we've worked with, and I know Jesus has worked with, like these, they just continue to be a resource. The programs like this need to continue that resource for schools and the unique needs and challenges that the Hispanic students face. Also pairing up, having college tours for the Hispanic high school students, educational resources, and for the parents as well, with higher education, how to access it, the scholarship, the financial aid. We do all these things with the Virginia Hispanic Foundation. I know there's many other great Hispanic programs that offer these similar things. And this makes a difference in the lives of the students and moving forward. And so, these are all additional solutions to help our future Hispanic workforce. And I think that's what the importance is and where we're at right now. And also with our foundation, we have Trabaja VA, which helps with workforce development, providing workforce education, job search, career exploration. So it's a natural feeder for the students that are in our high school programs, and then they go on to college. We try to stay connected with them and to help continue that path to the workforce pipeline. And so we've also looked at partnerships with colleges and universities, especially with Virginia Union University, which is a Black college, but now is becoming also a Black and Hispanic serving educational institution. So these types of things are where we're at, what I'm hearing from the schools, when we're in the schools working with the students, and then looking in this 2021 school year, hybrid approach is going to be the way to go to work with the students and the families.
Lisa, thank you. Thank you so much. Before we move on, please, if you have a question, just post that on the chat, and we're going to be having the Q&A right after all the panelists speak. Let's move on to healthcare. Francisco Ayala, take it away.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Francisco, and I'm actually working with Kaiser Permanente, which is why I felt comfortable enough bringing you the information about the healthcare and how it's been affecting the Latino community. Now, one thing that we're going to find amongst everything, healthcare, whether it be also education and otherwise, is that the Latino community has been disproportionately affected, but it's not because of something that is inherent to the Latino community itself. It is mostly because of additional conditions such as socioeconomics that cause the Latino community to disregard certain services over others. So one very, very important thing to note is that non-Hispanic white people do represent a majority of the US population. And that's why we also always categorize them both for medical situations and otherwise as a separate entity. But notably among children in the Latino community, we've seen a lot of emergency cases for COVID-19 particularly. Now, one thing that Tom was very acute in mentioning is that the Latino community generally has a multi-generational household. That is just something that is part of our both culture and part of our socioeconomic situation. What does that mean? Well, that means that if you have to send out your children to school or to any social situation where they cannot avoid contact with other children, they are much more propense and much more much more vulnerable to infections of any type, of course, but of course also to airborne infections like COVID-19 and the flu. And when they come back home, there will be a third generation there. Well, there will be a first, in this case, generation, the grandparents and otherwise, who are vulnerable to those infections. So one of the things that we've seen in the Latino community is that the infection rate has been unfortunately underreported, but it has also been disproportionately high because of that situation. Now, does that mean that the Latino community is more physically vulnerable to infection? Absolutely not. It just means that because of the socioeconomics of the situation, the infections are easier to spread within the Latino community. So that's one thing to take into consideration. But either way, so that's one of the things that we've observed. Now, the CDC puts out information regarding vaccinations and this sort of situation, but what it doesn't look into is why our community is refusing vaccination. Now, we all know that there's vaccination hesitancy in all of the United States. It's not just the Latino community. There's vaccination hesitancy of all kinds. But the reasons why people are hesitant for vaccination differ culturally. And so one thing that we have found, at least in the vaccination clinics that we've had with Kaiser Permanente, is that misinformation about vaccination is prevalent between the youth in the Latino community to a disproportionate level than it is for the rest of the community. Now, why is that? Well, mostly because we are culturally separate from the rest of the population. Much of the hesitancy for this whole vaccination, which has been a big factor for healthcare, is because we try our very best, at least in the Latino community, to appear like we are self-sufficient. And that is something that is more cultural than medical. And like I've said before, the Latino community isn't physiologically any different. It does, like any subgroup of humans, we do have our own characteristics, we do have our own divergencies, but the susceptibility to infection isn't one of them. So what is that's going on? Well, it's hesitancy. Well, what we have seen, though, is that also acquisitive power. So Susana Moreno actually mentioned that Latinos have increased their buying power, and that may be true, but we're not spending it on healthcare. We are spending it on other things that we try to use to substitute healthcare. And also, since most healthcare in the United States is provided from employer plans, the Latino community which lost a lot of employment because we're in the service occupations, that means that most of them lost their medical plans as well. So what happens? Well, like anyone who's ever taken a look through the Giffen Good catalog in their economics books will tell you, we tend to use the products and services that we can afford, even if those go up in price. So what do I mean by this? Let's say that the cost of medications goes up. Well, now we can't afford medication and medical insurance, so we do one or the other. So what has been happening is that most people in the Latino community have opted to simply continue to pay for the medications of whatever other whatever the sickness they have, instead of expanding their expenditures into preventive measures for COVID-19, or in fact, getting an insurance plan that will cover their actual care. So what happens? Well, we've actually seen that hospitalizations for COVID-19 are increased for the Latino community over what it is for the non-Latino community. Actually, if you take a look, and I'll send links to this if you all want to take a look at these things, but we actually have more Hispanic people hospitalized than non-Hispanic people, simply because we let it get that far. So to not bog you down with a whole bunch of numbers, what I can tell you is this. As far as the healthcare system goes, we've seen a lot of Latinos lose their healthcare coverage because much of it was from employment. That means that things get worse quicker, and that's why hospitalizations for Latinos go up. The problem is being hospitalized generally is much more expensive than preventive care, than taking care of yourself. The problem also is that we don't have the means to take care of ourselves because we've been affected so much by the economic turmoil and thus lost, again, employment and income. So these things kind of go hand in hand, and this is nothing new. If you take a look at whatever data set you prefer to look at for any sickness, you'll find that impoverished populations suffer greatly from these situations. So every pandemic that has ever hit humanity has always started out with the broader but lower income populations. And that unfortunately seems to still be the case with the Latino community. So even though I'm focusing on the healthcare aspect, it is impossible to dissociate healthcare numbers from income and disparity in employment numbers. So I guess to round it off, I can just tell you guys this. The more that the Latino community or any community is affected by disproportionate, by disproportionate inequality in employment and education, this will simply translate almost in a one-to-one ratio to difficulties with healthcare. So the only thing I can propose is we have to, as a group, try to tell each other, try to remind each other the importance of preventive care. Unfortunately, the Latino community is lacking in their attention to preventive care, whether it be mental health, by the way. We are one of the social groups that least goes to any sort of mental care specialist, but also for general preventive care to visit our physicians. Generally, we as a community wait until it's too bad, until we can't wait anymore, and that's why we end up hospitalized. So if you would like to take a look at the numbers, I can send you all the links. Most of these come from the CDC, but we also have independent studies that will show that this is kind of a disproportionate thing. But if you take a look a little bit deeper and you correlate that with all the income differences, you will find that they're almost at a one-to-one ratio. And I believe that Tom Baker, I believe it was you who said that if you want to see what is going to happen with a population, start with the Latino community. I think that's accurate, but mostly it is accurate because we're the ones that let it get worse. So we're the first ones to see the symptoms. Now, I know that sounds bleak, and that was not the point. I didn't want to depress anyone. There's also good news. The good news also is that in populations that are above 18 years old, the vaccination for Hispanic for the Hispanic community has increased. That means that as time goes by, we are getting smarter about our healthcare. We are seeing that older generations are actually taking into account the time that they've seen how the healthcare system works in the United States and taking advantage of it. Mostly as well, we are seeing a big push from many employers to include plans for healthcare for employees that normally didn't have them. Now, if you're not really plugged into how employer healthcare works, it's the situation in which an employer can offer several different medical, either health plans or insurance plans or otherwise, depending on the different categories of employees that they have. And we have seen, fortunately, that the Hispanic community has benefited from these distinctions. So as our younger generations join the workforce, as they turn 18 or they turn 21 and start getting their first jobs and otherwise, they are coming to see that having healthcare is something that is actually beneficial to the point that the employers are pushing for it. So even though we do have higher infection rates in populations in the younger side, we are also seeing an explosion of vaccination and an explosion of good healthcare coverage for the older generation, which is something that is kind of counterintuitive for most people, because most people think that you lose all your healthcare, kind of awareness as you age, and that's actually for us, it's not true. So we are actually improving. We just went through a year that made us notice where we're lacking. And I do believe that where we are lacking is in that letting our younger generations know that taking preventive steps is the better way to go. And again, if anyone wants to take a look at the information, I will send them the links. But I do believe that simply it is a matter of making the rest of the community aware that the resources exist, that if you already are employed, if you're going back into the workforce, make sure you actually go into the healthcare plans that your employer is offering and actually make use of them to stop stigmatizing getting help, whether it be for mental health or for just physical health in general, we have to, as a group, come together and show that there is nothing wrong with being preventive with these things, that you actually have to make the most of them. I think I went a little bit over time there.
Yep.
But,
Yep. Twice as long, but that's okay.
Sorry, I just and I didn't even throw the numbers at you. Again, if anyone actually wants to take a look at the numbers, most of them are published by the CDC, but we do have some independent graphs that we can share with you guys.
Thank you, Francisco, for very valuable information. Let's move on to affordable housing with Roger Campos. Roger, take it away.
Thank you, Marco. Can you hear me okay? I just want to test. Okay, so sorry, everyone. I'm driving back from the Maryland Municipal League that was held in Ocean City, Maryland, the last couple of days. I just wanted to talk about maybe 3 important programs. I'll give you an overview of the state of Maryland record, for affordable rental housing. This last year, we had an unprecedented year, and we had about $40 million supporting 18 projects. And we created more than 22,000 affordable housing units statewide. Many of you know that rental housing, has been really tested during the pandemic. And it's really a big picture for us. And the big picture for the state of Maryland is that for every dollar in state funds we receive, we an economic impact $23. So it's really an important initiative that is undertaken, by not only us, but the leadership of Governor Hogan. We've also implemented.
I think we lost Roger.
Including families of color. We call it the MMP program. And we also offer down payment and closing costs assistance. And thereby, we're promoting home ownership throughout the state of Maryland. One of the interesting features is where we need help. We need help identifying Hispanic families that would like to borrow money from us, receive closing costs and down payment assistance. I'm going to give you a couple of statistics. For the 4,400 home buyers that we helped last year, 43% were African American, and only 5% were Hispanic. Hispanics comprise 11% of the Maryland population. So we really need to do more. This is an opportunity for the chambers to work with us on outreach to families of low and moderate income. And mainly, these are first-time homeowners. And so what is interesting for us is working with loan products where there's no balloon payments or adjustable rates. And our mortgages are backed by the state of Maryland. One of the unique features of our mortgage program is our Smart Buy program. Our Smart Buy program allows people that have school debt to get a second loan, which is not a mortgage, at 0 interest. And it's up to $30,000. And after 5 years, it's forgiven. So this could be a really huge, meaningful financial impact to people that come out of college with huge financial debt as a way to relieve that burden. Another program that we're just launching is called the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. like I said, we've received $500 million from the federal government to help renters and landlords, who aren't meeting their mortgage payment. So we're getting ready to launch this program. And if you'd like more information about it, feel free to email me at roger.campos@marylandspelledout.gov. I'll be happy to help you understand what the eligibility requirements are. And we expect to launch this in the next couple of weeks. We do have a Hispanic organization working with us. We would like more Hispanic outreach. And finally, the program that was just announced by Governor Hogan a few days ago at the Municipal League is one for businesses. And it's a very unique program. It's called Project Restore. It's $25 million, and it's going to provide economic relief for those businesses that aren't making their rent payments or either starting a business or not making their rent payments. And you will be getting, if you're eligible, a grant up to $2,500 a month, up to 12 months, to cover expenses. And it's primarily to help stimulate business growth, so that if you're a brand new business and you go into a vacant facility where an existing business was, you're still eligible to get that grant. One of the other eligibility requirements is that you must be a small business with 50 or fewer more employees. This is brand new. Governor Hogan just announced it 2 days ago. My agency is the one responsible for administering this program. So if any of you have any questions about affordable housing or renters assistance or the mortgage program or this new program for businesses, Marco has my email. I just gave it to you, and feel free to reach out to me. Thank you, Marco.
Sounds great. Thank you, Roger, for the valuable information. This is great stuff. Let's move on to workforce development. Alberto Marino.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you, everyone. Let me share a little bit my. Just 1 second. To share my screen. Okay, I promise to be in 1 minute. 5 minutes, sorry. Okay, everybody looking now?
Yep.
Okay, it's framed. Okay, between March 1st, 2020 to March 1st, 2021, 56,388 initial unemployment claims were filed by people identified as Hispanic. This represents 18.9% of total initial unemployment claims. And Hispanic make up about 17.7% of the population. These include all the individuals who identify as Hispanic regardless of the race, okay? For the third quarter, the 2021, Hispanic in the Commonwealth of Virginia are at 9.7% of unemployment. I would say individuals identified as Hispanic made up a slightly larger share of unemployment insurance claims than their share of the larger population, or Hispanic are overrepresented among initial unemployment insurance claims when compared to the population. It's something that's an issue when they put the race and also, for example, Latino white, as that's miscalculation is going to be affecting sometimes this count. What scenario do we have? So let's see. We have the macro trends. We have a strengthening recovery throughout the spring into early summer, surging consumer spending, rising inflation, because we noticed that there's some kind of inflation. President Barkin, we can talk better about this. Continued job gains, choppy results on jobs between April and May, record high job openings in April, which is good. Key factor impacting recovery, impact of fiscal and monetary support stimulus, consumer confidence and household consumption, return to in-person work versus continued remote. This is very important, especially in transit, which is my specialty is my work. Deployment and effectiveness of vaccines and continued spread of the virus and variants. Okay. Now, looking ahead, GDP forecast from the Stephen Fuller Institute from George Mason University, minus 2.9% decline in 2020 versus minus 3.5% national. 2021 is a rebuilding year. Recovery of full employment, hopefully by 2022. Upsides, continued decrease in case increase in vaccination, but important for jobs, infrastructure, plan passage. Downside, vaccine resistant mutation that we have noticed right now, and prolonged unemployment and stagnant consumption. So the second one. Next, we need to keep an eye out. Is June 2021, the employment situation. So we need to see the final numbers. The preliminary Q1 Virginia employment as well, the full data for by September. The result of census 2020. The Virginia growth 7.9%, 2020, 10 years. The slowing growth overall, more detailed demographic data on local regional levels. But also remember, I'm an employer. This is what I need, this is what I've been seeing. Focus on Latino training in soft skills and skills and trade certification and retraining, especially what President Barkin talking about the disparity between women and men. Retraining for non-traditional jobs for women. Childcare will be an issue. Remember that childcare will be an issue. Maybe they think not fully return to work. But all those request the soft skill training and skill trade certification via WIOA, via Workforce Investment Opportunity Act, or any additional program funding, county level, state level, and federal level. Construction is booming. The industry needs more Latinos, and the infrastructure plan also needs those employees at any cost. On my end, I need more than 700 people before the end of the year. As we look, the post-COVID economy in our area, positive signs are emerging in many key indicators. We are on a pathway for recovery after practically 15 months of challenges. We are not yet where we need to be, but overall in a better state than we were last year. In our case, the most remarkable improvement to mention on declining unemployment, recruiting is on the rise. Talking about myself, open position is starting to fill up, and the efforts to do so are slowly but surely resuming. We, of course, need to, another Virginia Chamber, Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, we need to stay monitoring closely, making sure that we contribute and to keep those positive signs stabilizing and playing in a part in the health of our state, the whole region, and the country's economy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alberto. Thank you so much. Let's move on to small business growth and sustainability. Mauricio Vasquez.
Marco, muchas gracias. Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for being here. Much like Alberto, my predecessor, I will be brief. So approximately 66,000 Latino owners firms account for 12% of all businesses in the DC area. And nationwide, it's the group of small business owners that has grown the most over the past decade, approximately 34% compared to 1% for all other owners in the United States. So that gives us an idea, with all the other statistics and numbers that have been shared by the previous speakers, of the power and the opportunities that the Hispanic and the Latino market represents for the US, and especially for the DC area and the surrounding states and cities and suburbs. So just like the Hispanic market has grown for 34% over the past decade, It's also bearing that brunt of the economic crisis that has been caused by COVID-19, especially because of the sectors where those companies are, which are primarily the hospitality, the food industry, restaurants, retail, construction. Here in the DC area, we also have around 13% of Hispanic-owned companies that are in technology who have suffered a little less during this pandemic. So between February and June of last year, we had a decline of about 32% of Latino business owners in the area, and it is the most for all small businesses that we have. So when you compare the impact of the Latino-owned businesses in the area, if those businesses go, so will all the area's economy. So this is critical to the recovery of the economy during and now through the post-pandemic areas that the phases that we're going through. So how can government, private sector, and financial sector best support those businesses during this crisis and the post-crisis? Definitely, we need access to capital in the forms of loans and grants, institutions that can act as guarantors for some micro small businesses who cannot sustain more than 5 employees at most. But we also identify other areas that help in addition to capital, because capital doesn't flow freely. We believe there's also a need for better communication among the Latino-owned businesses in both English and Spanish. And together with communications is the networking factors with financial institutions, because Latinos and Latino owners sometimes are not sure or aware how to take advantage of institutional mechanisms like insurance, loans, and grants. They don't know how to fill in the information that's necessary. They don't know where the resources are, and they don't know how to get that information and how to successfully apply for those loans. So in addition to that information and networking, it all translates into having better access to what we call social capital. So they need access not only to the capital per se, but to those networkings with the financial institutions, the public institutions, and other actors who are helping them, so that small businesses can benefit from these programs and can definitely get out of the situations in which they are right now. And this is why forums like this one are important as an outreach to the Latino community. We hope to see more of these forums in the near future with several institutions as well as with FRB. So we think that capital is crucial. It's going to continue to be crucial over the next years. And we hope to continue to help small businesses and Latino businesses in the Montgomery County area with the support of all other institutions that can definitely provide all the help and support that is needed. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you, Mauricio. And from the Maryland side, I think based on the 2018 census, there were close to 60,000 Hispanic businesses in Maryland. And looking forward to see what the 2020 census show, because I think it's probably going to be over 100,000. So I'm excited about that. And I'm sure Virginia and Washington are probably in the same kind of, boat looking into this growth that is amazing. So thank you for all the speakers that provided valuable information. Tom, thank you for everything that you shared with us. We're going to move on to Q&A. I think we have a few questions already on the chat, but I'm going to hand it over to Renee. Renee, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to be with you all. I'm Renee Haltom. I'm with the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond as well, the regional executive out of our Richmond office. We've heard a wealth of information today, perspectives from a variety of sectors and issues critical to the well-being of the Hispanic population. So I just want to thank you all. It's critical for us to do what we do to have this perspective, and just know that we take it to heart. So appreciate your time and thoughts. So I'm going to field some questions to Tom today, put him back in the hot seat. If you all have any questions, please do enter them in the chat and I'll be monitoring that. But to start off, I'm going to go back to the overall economy for a moment. And so Alberto, in his remarks on workforce development, mentioned rising inflation as sort of an environmental factor facing us all now. So Tom, how are the recent reports of price increases affecting your view of inflation, and how is the Fed responding?
Thanks, Renee. And thanks everybody for those talks, very helpful. Well, we're clearly seeing price pressures today. A lot of it's explainable. Airline prices are up. Well, that's because people are traveling again, and they were down so much last year. Auto prices are up. That's because there's a chip shortage and people are struggling to get cars. And frankly, there's supply chain shortages in lots of places that are driving prices up. But we're definitely seeing price pressure today. And so from a Fed standpoint, you ask yourself the question of how much of that is explainable and temporary, and how much of that is, going to continue and be persistent on in the future. Because I think you will see some reversion in the next, period of time. Car rental rates you can't get a car today, so prices are very high. They'll come back down. And if you think about your Uber surge pricing, that'll come back down. And so some of that's going to come back down, and we'll just see what happens. What I watch very closely is, as best I can, the expectations of businesses and markets in terms of where prices are likely to go. And so far, those seem to be contained. That's just something you've got to watch every day.
Great. Thanks so much. And another issue that I think will resonate with many people here today, in fact, it was alluded to in a few people's remarks, there's constant news of shortages and ongoing issues with supply chains. When we're out talking with businesses, we hear about this every day from big businesses, small businesses, across sectors. So from your perspective, and you just mentioned some of it, what is causing those issues, and when can we expect supply chains to catch up?
Well, it's a little crazy, isn't it? We shut the economy down a year and a third ago. And who knew it would be so hard to bring the economy back? We shut down auto plants because we're worried about COVID. Who knew we would shut down auto plants because we couldn't get enough chips? We shut down theme parks because we were worried about exposure. Who knew King's Dominion is only open 3 days a week because they can't get any lifeguards? So I have a lot of empathy for businesses. If we had all sat together in January and said, are vaccines going to roll out? Yes or no? Are they going to be as effective as they've seemed to be? Yes or no? None of us would have, bet our fortunes that by March and April, we'd be running at full steam. And then you could add in a stimulus package or two that really got things going. So I just think a lot of businesses got surprised. A lot of manufacturers have gotten behind, and it's just very hard to catch up. So that's one big piece of what's going on. The second piece, which is also very apparent, and someone mentioned it, you can't find any workers right now. And I don't think that's a planning surprise. I think that is the combination of a big increase in retirements. That definitely happened. A bunch of parents still home with their kids who are not in school or not in camp or can't get childcare. And so that's another piece of it. I think there's a piece which is people do have money in their pockets, whether it be from stimulus or from reduced spending. And the drumbeat in the press every day, we didn't pass a $15 minimum wage, but we certainly have talked a lot about it. And then you've got Walmart and Amazon and McDonald's and Chipotle all talking about $15. And I guess if I had an $11 job I was considering, I might spend a few more weeks and try to get a $15 job. And I think that's what's going on. And so there's a suppressed supply situation, which I presume will start to clear when we get to the fall. But it's definitely holding people back. It's definitely most pronounced at lower wage levels. When we talk to people who are paying $15 or under, they really, really feel it. And there's less of that, I'd say, at the higher wage levels. And so, it's hard to get workers. It's hard to get materials. There's logistics issues getting ships in from overseas. And I think all of that is driving a supply chain thing. And I refer back to, we fought a war on COVID. And at the end of every war, there's an adjustment process where you got to get the factories. I'm going to exaggerate here, but, no longer making tanks, but now making washing machines. And we've got that kind of issue going on. We just got to get the American factories back making what they make at the pace they can and catch up with demand.
Thanks so much. And you just mentioned wages. So a question has come in from the audience from the other perspective of wages. And the question is, restaurants and other establishments have raised their prices as well. Tipped wages employees have reported that they are not receiving more income than before. What could be done to make sure that all have access to a decent wage to live?
Well, a lot is happening. I think if you look at compensation for lower paid employees, that's really where we're seeing pressure right now. Compensation for higher paid employees is increasing at sort of normal levels. Compensation for lower wage employees is increasing much faster. And that's this tight situation I just talked about. And I think that's what's going to make it. I can't speak specifically about tipped employees, but the thing I've been sort of noodling lately is if you were in a bar or restaurant before, you probably thought that was about as stable a job as you could get. You could always get another, if you left your restaurant, you could always go to another restaurant. Well, that industry closed for 3 months and then really only came back at half speed for a long time. And by the way, the customers were not very happy and many of them were rude. And you might have worried about wearing a mask or, being exposed to COVID. I have wondered whether that industry is as attractive to employees today as it was a year and a half ago. And so another thing that could go on is if there continues to be a labor shortage in that industry, I think you'll see some changes in compensation practices that'll have to happen to try to get the workforce you need.
Another question from the audience. Are interest rates going to bounce up suddenly and negatively impact people who have taken out loans to survive?
Well, that's an important question and one I'm probably not going to fully answer. But what I will say is this. We've put our guidance on interest rates, and we made it pretty clear that we're not going to lift off interest rates at all until you get to a lot closer to maximum employment than we are today. Until, you remember I said we've got 7 million people on the sidelines, until we hit 2% inflation, which I think we have, and until inflation looks like it's going to sustain over 2%. And so we've got a ways to go in the labor market. We've got a ways to go on sustaining prices at our target. And we're not planning to lift rates until those three conditions are met.
Okay, great. So one of our participants notes that broadband access can help close educational gaps, and also notes that many Latino businesses operate on the road and in residential areas. And of course, Tom, this has been a focus of us at the Richmond Fed. Mm-hmm. So wondered if you could give an overview of what you think are the most important things that can be done to improve broadband access.
Yeah, well, and we have done a lot of investment. And if the group here is interested, we've got a guy on our team who's done some really interesting work here. What I'd say is this, there's two issues here. One is building it, the second is making it affordable. In both cases, I think there are massive gaps on what I'll call the last mile of getting the money that's been passed by Congress or the incentive programs for people into the hands of the people who need it. And that's a place, Michelle, when we were together in Manassas, we talked a lot about the communication issues of helping people get access to the aid that's out there. If you take what's about to be passed in the coming infrastructure bill on broadband, I'll make the case that we've passed more than enough money to build broadband for everybody, right? I think if all that money got deployed and all got built in the most efficient way, you could deploy broadband everywhere. But I just say it's the huge difference between passing the bill and distributing the money and spending it wisely. And so this last mile of helping localities navigate how to get people to construct the fiber, the infrastructure you need, that's a huge thing. On the other part, affordability, there are some pretty interesting plans to help make broadband more affordable. But as we've dug into it, I think there are a lot of people who could benefit from that who actually don't even know about it or can't make it available or don't live in a situation where their life is so stable that they could get the broadband and get the incentive. And so, again, I think at this point with this bill being passed, we're closing in on the point where the issue is less now money. The issue is now distribution and getting into the right hands. And I really do think local organizations like yours can play a huge role in helping inform people and helping others navigate.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So Roger mentioned affordable housing, but maybe let's touch on housing generally. We've had a moratorium on evictions in the pandemic. This may have kept evictions down, but many borrowers have stopped paying and are behind on rent. potentially making them vulnerable to evictions when the ban is lifted. So are you worried about that? And what do you anticipate will happen as the moratoria is lifted?
Well, this is another last mile problem. So Congress has passed $47 billion in rental assistance. The Philly Fed has done an analysis that suggests as of the end of March, you had about 11 billion in unpaid back rent. And so I'm a simple guy, 47 billion here, 11 billion there, we ought to be able to square this circle. The problem, of course, is getting the money in the hands of the people who need it. And I have the impression, and by the way, you've got bureaucratic issues, you've got administration issues. No one's built to distribute 47 billion. You've also got issues of landlords who may actually prefer to not have people living in their spots so they can repurpose their property. They're also, you've got states who want to put constraints on the money. You know, we'll give you the money now, but we don't want you to evict the people for another 10 or 12 months. The landlords are pushing back. So there's a ton of last mile slippage here in terms of getting the 47 billion into the pockets of those who are owed the rent in a way that the people who live in the places can survive. And I think it's very different by state. For those of you who are in Virginia, I think Virginia's distributed as best as I can tell in a more seamless way than Maryland has, just to be clear on that. But I have empathy for the problem. It's hard. You know, landlords are not the most, especially low-income landlords are not the most, they're not a group that gets the most empathy. And, you know, the states, I think, are legitimately don't want to just give the landlords the money and then have them evict anyway the next day. On the other hand, we don't need a bunch of people on the streets. And so I think getting this last mile navigated, the money's there, but the mechanics of getting that done, I do not think are quite there.
Yeah, so I'm getting a theme of a lot of the issues we're facing today is that the devil's in the details and how they're implemented. I'll just say, sorry, Renee. I think it's hard to ignore the amount of funding that has been passed over the last year. I mean, it's just a historic level of funding. It's an enormous opportunity for our communities if we get it in the right hands, but nobody built the infrastructure to distribute this amount of funding. And so that's where I really think the leverage is right now, is creating a way to get that money in the hands where it's needed. Excellent. Yeah. And a lot of these partners today, as you said, are in a great position to help with that. So I think this will be the last question, and then we'll toss it back to Marco to wrap us up. So what do you think is the future of remote work versus office work, in-office work?
Well, I mean, for sure, we're going to have more flexible environments. The Richmond Fed has finally agreed we're going to be more flexible, which is amazing for us. But I just say that the markets haven't spoken on it yet. I think it'll be different business by business, but there are businesses where employers think they're going to go fully in person, and businesses were same industry where they think they'll go fully remote, and they're going to compete against each other. One with more collaboration or more personal sales, one with less overhead, less rent. We'll see who wins that. And there are, and we'll see in those two models who gets the employees they need. You know, do employees want to go to places where they collaborate with others or not? By the same token, there are employees who think they're going to work all remote, and maybe that'll work. So certain industries like technology where that works today, but I don't know. Are they going to build the skills and the capabilities? Are they going to be competing against offshore talent? Just to give you an example. And so I think 5 years from now, we'll know better where this lands, but I think the market hasn't really landed on what the model is going to be. And I think it may differ by industry and sector. I do think, though, the fact that we can have this conversation in my life, you know, I can do 5 of these a week, whereas in the old world, we'd have been negotiating for, I don't know, November and trying to find a day where we could all get together in the same building. So to the extent you think these are valuable, I do think there's real benefits from the ability to engage this way.
All right, well, let's all agree to touch base a year from now this way and resolve this question, see where we landed. All right, I want to thank you, Tom, so much for your time and answering questions. And Marco, I'm going to toss it back to you and thank you all again today.
And I just want to say thanks. I really appreciated the speakers here. I learned a good bit, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Renee, and thank you, Tom. Yeah, I think the new normal is going to be a combination between virtual and in person. I think that's not going to go away. And people are going to take advantage of that. And like you said, you know, being virtual also gives us more access to be able to do this more often. We do probably 3 sessions with the Federal Reserve Bank annually, and looking forward to do the next one, and we're going to continue doing it in the format the way we had it, combined with all the Hispanic chambers in the area. Thank you, Tom, for being with us today, and for your team. This is great. All the speakers also, thank you so much, and the leaders from all the Hispanic chambers. We're going to continue talking. We chat monthly, casually, to see how we can help each other. So we're going to continue doing that. And if you have any questions, reach out to your local chapter. Join the chambers. Join the chambers and get all the resources you need. Again, thanks everyone for being here today. This was great. We'll do it again, and stay tuned for more. Have a great one.
Thank
and
you,
happy
everyone.
Friday. Happy Friday, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you, Marco.